Chaos at Donald Trump's DOJ. Officials are ramping up revenge probes in the wake of Attorney General Pam Bondi's firing. The Washington Post reporting, quote, uncertainty at DOJ as top officials vie to replace Bondi, prompting, quote, concern from some over the lengths to which they may go to impress Trump. MAGA favorites Harmeet Dillon and former Fox News host Jeanine Pirro have both made moves that are, quote, viewed by insiders as efforts to raise their profile and jockey for the president's attention. Like this one, initiated by Dillon, who currently oversees the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, demanding all Detroit area ballots from the 2024 election. She wrote, DOJ wants the 2024 ballots so it can determine whether election laws were followed. Fact check. There is no evidence of widespread voter fraud in any recent presidential election. That includes 2024, which Trump ended up winning, by the way. In fact, while he lost Detroit in 24, he made gains with voters there over his performance from 2020. So this all part of Trump's sweeping effort to probe past elections as he doubles down on his, quote, big lie. FBI Director Kash Patel making the unusual announcement that arrests related to the 2020 election are now imminent.
We've got all the information we need. We're working with our prosecutors, the Department of Justice, and their Attorney General Todd Blanche, and we are going to be making arrests. And it's coming, and I promise you, it's coming soon.
And now one of the lawyers involved with trying to overturn the 2020 election, Joe DiGenova, is leading a, quote, grand conspiracy probe into former federal officials who investigated Trump, reaching all the way back to the Russia probe in 2016. DiGenova sworn in just hours ago as counselor to the Attorney General. Trump's retribution probes have been largely unsuccessful, drawing scrutiny from both legal experts and career officials rejected by grand juries. A senior federal prosecutor in Miami withdrawing from an investigation into former CIA Director John Brennan, reportedly due to concerns over the legal viability of the, quote, politically charged case pushed by Trump loyalists. All of this escalating ahead of what's sure to be a contentious midterm election cycle as Trump works to erode faith in our electoral system. It's always good to see you. What is your response to Trump's DOJ now escalating their probes into past elections? And I particularly want your thoughts on the figure that is Joe DiGenova, what that signals to you, a person who's been so deeply invested in the big lie, leading an investigation where he has already publicly concluded that there was a conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, right out of the gate, he's got a conflict of interest. He represented President Trump in his personal capacity when he was challenging the results of the 2020 election. And now here he is, after having made some really outrageous statements at that time, leading the charge into this investigation. There's not even a pretense of credibility here. I mean, we know that there have been a number of investigations into Russia's connections with the election in 2016 that began the Russia investigation. There was Robert Mueller's report. There was a Senate Intelligence Committee report. There was one by our own Intelligence Committee. There was an Inspector General report. And finally, there was John Durham, who was the special counsel appointed by William Barr. None of them found that there was any conspiracy, that there was anything wrong with looking into this. In fact, having read and studied the Mueller report, I assign it to my students in my national security class. It would have been a dereliction of duty for the FBI not to have investigated Russia's ties with the election in 2016.
So, Barbara, when you look at all of the chaos that is coming out of this DOJ and the FBI right now, do you read the moves that these different people are making as being sort of desperate attempts to stay in the president's circle at a time when he is starting to release people from his cabinet? We hear the reporting that he's interested in firing more people. Kash Patel is one of the people who's come up at times in that reporting, for example. And so are they just kind of trying to make Trump happy because they know this is sort of part of his list of greatest hits? Or do you think there's a real project building here from the retribution campaign to what we're seeing on the election front?
Well, it's always dangerous, I think, to try to speculate in what's in the minds of either Donald Trump or any of the people that he has appointed to office, because I don't know that they think like the rest of us. But it is certainly a pattern that we saw the firing of Pam Bondi. Some of the reports indicated that President Trump was frustrated with her inability to charge his political enemies criminally. And so as soon as she leaves, and now there's this vacuum and a need to find a replacement, suddenly we see Todd Blanche issuing a weaponization report that to me seems baseless about prosecutions under the FACE Act involving abortion clinics. We see Harmeet Dillon launching an inquiry into Michigan about fraudulent ballots when there are none. It's been dispositively considered by courts here in Michigan. And so this too seems like an effort to sort of curry favor. And then, of course, the so-called grand conspiracy in Florida, where there's an effort to subpoena people and perhaps charge people, and installing Joe DeGeneva after we see the departure from this case of a career prosecutor amid reports that she didn't see that the case was strong enough to bring. So I don't know the motivations, but we do seem, I think, to see an intensification of these efforts to file criminal charges or make some hay. And even if these cases don't see the light of day, if there are no criminal prosecutions, people are talking about it. It's in the news. And so it advances that false narrative that our elections are rife with fraud and cannot be trusted. And I worry about what that means for the 2026 and then maybe even the 2028 elections.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear from voters all the time that they are interpreting it that same way. They're concerned about the upcoming midterm elections being undermined. I have to ask you very quickly about this bombshell reporting from The Atlantic about Kash Patel, and just to get your assessment of what the FBI has essentially become. Of course, he has denied this. The most striking section of this reporting, I know our viewers have heard so much about it today, but it is the section where they describe essentially officers needing to use sort of SWAT-style efforts to bust through to try to get to Patel. They describe someone who has been drinking incredibly heavily, something that we know the president, who does not drink, does not like in the people around him. But when you just see the details, the depth of the details in this report, what do you think the FBI has become?
Well, obviously, I don't know whether these reports are accurate, but I will note that the sources quote dozens of people across all parts of interactions with the FBI, and the reporting seems sound. Of course, Kash Patel has challenged it and claims it is defamatory. So I don't know if it's true, but if it is true, this is such a far fall from what the FBI was when I worked with agents. You think about the epitome of the FBI director was Robert Mueller, someone who was ramrod straight, who was a person who worked hard, rolled up his sleeves, and served with honor. And, one of the goals I've always heard at every level of the FBI is don't ever do anything in your personal or professional life that could bring shame to the FBI. That is the FBI way, that you do things, not only the right thing, but you do it the right way and for the right reason. And so if these reports are true, that we've got a director who is not just drinking on duty, but drinking to the point where he's unable to do the job, not only is that bringing shame to the FBI, but it is making our entire country unsafe.